Well, hello everybody, and welcome to a brand new episode of the Story to Screen podcast, the movie podcast where we review all different kinds of movies, new and old. I am your host, Chris, and joining me as usual is my elf dwarf. Well, he's more elf-looking than dwarf. Benjamin Curley. Hey, Ben, how's it going?
Good, pretty good. How are you?
I'm doing fine. Weather is not really to my liking today, but I'm learning to cope with it. How about your area?
Oh, well, you know, it's weather.
Is it raining over there?
I was sprinkling on the way home from work, but that's about it.
Okay.
It'll probably rain tonight.
Okay, yeah. And joining us all the way from Los Angeles, I'm going to say it that way, Los Angeles, California, he is the founder of one of the biggest, or the biggest, let me put it that way, the biggest Lord of the Rings website in the world, Cliff Broadway from the OneRing.net. Cliff, welcome to our show.
Thank you very much indeed, gentlemen. Not a founder. Let me just, for strict, station identification, let's say that I'm one of the senior contributing members, rather, to, it's an all-volunteer community there at the OneRing.net, and the founders would be 4 other individuals, but we're all keeping the flame burning brightly for Tolkien fans around the world.
Okay, that's good to hear.
Yes.
By the way, let me just say, I know I said this to you already a couple times, but I really appreciate your website, the OneRing.net. I have been following it ever since 2002 when the two towers hype was going around, and just following the website, and even during that really droughty period of whether or not the Hobbit was ever going to be made, I was always coming onto your website every day, just making sure if there was any progress of any kind happening with the films. So you do a fantastic job on the website. So
acknowledgement goes a long way, even a little bit of acknowledgement. And thank you, man, on behalf of everybody. There's a very big team of women and men who have been in love with Professor Tolkien. And we're all volunteers. None of us on staff get paid, and the website does not make any money, just enough to pay for its own servers and its bandwidth. Of course, we like to do big events and parties and shows, and we show up at conventions all around the nation. But it's from you guys that we get the chance to do it. It's the fact that you, Chris, and you, Benjamin, who's definitely more elven than dwarven, I would definitely say.
With a southern accent. He's got a southern accent there.
That's very good. The beard you're rocking,
it's not quite full enough to be dwarven. Yeah.
my beard, it's more like Aragorn kind of scruffiness there.
That Homer Simpson, Fred Flintstone shade. That little darker shade around that suggests that, yeah.
I do recall Fred Flintstone having a little bit of that there.
Both, he did.
Oh yeah, both Barney and Fred. I mean, thank you to the character designers at Hanna-Barbera, who inspired Ralph Bakshi, who we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, I better go into the introduction of that. After that long little introduction there, folks, tonight we'll be reviewing the 1978 Lord of the Rings film, directed by Ralph Bakshi. I think I pronounced it.
Close. Bakshi.
Directed by Ralph Bakshi. There you go. I got the pronunciation right. But before we go into a review, let's start out with weekly segments. So, actually, as we speak right now, just like about an hour ago, they actually released the banner, a new banner for the Battle of the Five Armies.
Oh yes.
Did you see that?
Yes, people have been texting that to me all day today. Striking imagery of actually Lady Galadriel and Christopher Lee and Hugo Weaving, the White Council, showing up at Dol Guldur. The only thing that makes us really prick up our ears as hardcore Tolkien fans is realizing all this stuff that's been buried in the appendix, one particular appendix of The Lord of the Rings, which Peter Jackson and New Line Cinema had the rights to adapt. And now here, in the very sixth and final film, almost 15 years later after we fell in love with Fellowship of the Ring, we're finally getting to see, these bits of Tolkien that have never been brought onto screen by any adaptation ever. So that's the most exciting thing.
I'm looking at this, and I'm really excited to see. I mean, we saw that a little bit in the in Unexpected Journey, but we saw, Christopher Lee, Hugo Weaving, and Kate Blanchett together, and Ian McKellen, for goodness sakes, in the same scene together. All these actors were, separate in their own scenes, and to see these four incredible actors from the trilogy come together is going to be quite a treat again. And I'm assuming it's going to be in a most explosive manner, if that makes any sense. So
yeah, it does. Well,
Ben,
let me turn the question to you guys, Chris. You and Benjamin, you've seen the new banner today for the third Hobbit film. What do you think?
Did you see it? Did you see it, Ben?
I just now pulled it up. I had not seen it yet.
It looks cool. I will give it that. It's epic looking.
It really is, and that's the thing. It's like I don't see the other films building up to this kind of epic yet. But he's got 3 hours to pull it off. So,
and God knows how much footage is going to be left in the extended edition.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't see this level of epic in the two previous films so far. But we'll see.
Look at the atmospherics that are going on, and in a piece of film marketing like this, it's there's lots and lots of dirt, grit. There's no charming Shire. There's no calm greenery. The things that we relate to when we talk about hobbits and the things that we love about Tolkien. This is like look at the bats.
It's like a Saving Private Ryan grimness to it.
Yeah, there's like nothing but flame destruction. There's nothing green or placid in the color palette. And as a piece of marketing, I think they are really trying to strike it up to that Return of the King level. And this is Peter's last chance to pull all of those rabbits out of his hat, or the rabbits in front of the sled, so to speak.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which we never talked about that in our review for the film. I was listening to it the other day, and I'm like, wait a minute. We didn't talk about the rabbits.
Yeah.
We didn't talk about Radagast at all. Well, maybe we'll talk about that when we get into our review, when we do this last one. But
okay, for sure.
But anyway, before we go into our review, let's just go ahead and just talk real quickly about some movies that we've been watching lately. Ben, have you seen anything good lately?
Honestly, I've been too busy to really catch anything lately. Last thing I saw was the last film I reviewed with you, actually. What
was it? Sergeant York.
Yeah, Sergeant York.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah.
Okay. Cliff, have you seen anything good lately?
Yes, actually. I've been looking into some other foreign animations that have been catching my eye, and something was floating around on Netflix that I grabbed a hold of and really fell in love with. It was a French film called The Rabbi's Cat. And I thought it was extraordinary. Because I'd been hearing about this graphic novel. The story of The Rabbi's Cat is a feature film that they adapted from the graphic novel, and it explores a conversation about theology and the benefits and the negative points about religion and its effect on mankind. And it's personified with these very interesting characters who live in Algeria, in far West Africa in the 1940s, as a French colony. And
time period movie. Well, that's interesting.
The movie becomes an interesting little joke because the cat starts talking, and the cat represents the human id, the unashamed, unpretentious human desire to fulfill his own desires and to be inquisitive about life and religion. And the cat wants to have his own bar mitzvah. And then it becomes the talk of the town that the rabbi has a talking cat. And then other characters are introduced who represent human artistic pursuits, and one characters represent Islam, other characters represent Christianity, others represent atheism, and one character, of course, obviously represents Judaism, and all of them have these interesting conversations. It's very intellectual, although you don't realize you're being put through like a little, theology class while you watch the whole movie. You think you're watching a fun road trip across Africa in the 40s.
Clever.
And it's just such a cool movie. It was very interesting.
Okay, and so that's the rabbi's cat, right?
Yeah, there's animation that strikes me, every now and then, and I start to talk to my friends about it, ad nauseum. You'll have to forgive me. As much as I am a Tolkien fan, I'm also a big Miyazaki fan and animation buff in general.
We reviewed Porco Rosso. That was like our second episode.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that was actually a pretty good film.
Love that.
Rabbi's Cat. I'll be on the lookout for that. That actually sounds kind of interesting.
Yeah, it's very intellectually interesting. Yeah.
When was it made?
No, IMDb says 2011.
Oh, so it's just recent. Okay.
It is.
Was it nominated for? Was it nominated for an Oscar for best animated film?
No. It won a lot of awards in France. It did not get an Oscar nomination. But thank you, Netflix, for actually providing a foreign film that has proper English subs.
Okay.
So I can't tell you. The last time I tried to watch Tokyo Godfathers, which is such an excellent film, Netflix was delivering it in pure original Japanese audio with no subtitles at all, and I was just ripping my hair out. It's a joke when I shaved my head. But anyway, you guys, it's on Netflix. Check it out while it's still there. And I'm very excited about Leica's new introduction to the marketplace, which just opened in the United Kingdom. We're looking at box trolls.
That looked very interesting. I remember seeing the trailer for that. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm a big fan of Coraline and Paranorman, and I love what they're doing at that studio. It's great stuff.
Who's doing that movie? Is it Tim Burton?
No, it's the team that did Paranorman.
Yes.
It's not related to Mr. Burton at all, but it is...
borrowing the same style. But
okay, like A Nightmare Before Christmas. The movie I just watched recently, I actually just recently watched My Fair Lady with Rex Harrison and Audrey Hepburn.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the adaptation of Pygmalion. I love that. It's great.
It was funny because I've actually watched quite a few different musicals lately, like American in Paris and Gigi. And it kind of gets to me how those movies, that there's those musicals where the plot is it's not very strong. It's kind of a weak plot, but the music and the singing and the musical numbers and the dance numbers are the strengths to those movies or to musicals. Yeah. In a way, My Fair Lady, as great as that movie is, and as adorable, I'm telling you, as adorable as Audrey Hepburn is in that movie.
Yeah. Especially when she's angry and singing that song, Poor Professor Higgins. I love that.
Yeah. And I think My Fair Lady is one of those movies where it suffers from kind of a weak plot, and the weaknesses that I think I find in it, are that the Professor Higgins, he tries to make her into a lady through English, through the teaching of the proper English language, but what I think he forgets to do is that wait a minute, if you're going to make a lady out of her, it's not just with English. Well, that's going to be a major benefit. You have to kind of teach her, decorum and the walk and all these other different aspects, and the movie doesn't kind of show that at times, and I kind of feel sad that the movie doesn't show that, because I think there's some interesting stuff there to do, but it's definitely one of those movies I thoroughly enjoy. I thoroughly enjoyed watching, and Rex Harrison is so great in that movie.
Yeah, man, I miss him. Those old style grand movie stars. I miss Rex Harrison. I know.
I mean,
with the Peter O'Toole immediately comes to mind when you say Rex Harrison, because I think of them as peas in a pod, and I miss them both very much.
Yeah, it was funny. I actually rewatched what was it, Lawrence of Arabia? 3 weeks ago, and just such a magnificent. I'm telling you, magnificent present he brings into that role right there. But anyway, wow, that was a kind of a bit of a long introduction right there, folks. So let's just go ahead and jump into our review of The Lord of the Rings from 1978.
Beyond the farthest reaches of the imagination and deep within the human heart, what is known as the Third Age of Middle-earth A tale is told of deeds and beings, a tale of a day when a great shadow will fall across the earth, and ancient sorcerers will lock in mortal combat with the phantoms of the night. This is the magnificent gift that J.R.R. Tolkien left to the human heart, the vision beyond imagination. The Lord of the Rings.
What you just heard was the original trailer for the Lord of the Rings from 1978. It's directed by Ralph Bakshi. Am I right?
Yes, indeed.
Yes. But Cliff, before we start our review, I just got a couple of questions to ask you. Since you're such a huge Lord of the Rings fan, do you recall that first moment when you encountered Lord of the Rings? Was it through the books or one of the early radio shows? What was your first encounter with Lord of the Rings?
The discovery of the Lord of the Rings for me happened when we were fans of The Hobbit, my brother and I, in the 70s. We were completely turned on to the Hobbit fascination by the Rankin and Bass animated version of The Hobbit, which from that doorway immediately to the books, and we were thrilled and surprised at the final page of The Hobbit, where Ballantine Books very kindly offered us a little mini paragraph that said, if you're interested in more about hobbits, why don't you read The Lord of the Rings? And I just fell over thinking to myself, gasp. It was a true SMH moment that I didn't even know that acronym at the time. I was just I was born in 1969, so follow the math. Mm-hmm. But I was thrilled that Tolkien had written more about hobbits. And The Lord of the Rings was the first thing that my brother and I devoured. Like most Tolkien fans, they'll tell you that they usually start with the Hobbit as the gateway introduction to the story. I don't know too many readers who read the trilogy first and then go and read the Hobbit later. Do you?
That was actually me. I was introduced to the first film by Tolkien. Oh, I'm sorry, Peter Jackson. When he did the Fellowship. All that first, and then it's like, oh, this is based on a classical book trilogy. Better read that. So
yeah, I'm in the same boat with Ben. We kind of discovered Lord of the Rings through the films. So that was how you kind of came across Lord of the Rings. Okay, that's cool. Now, what was it? What was it specifically about Lord of the Rings that just captured your imagination that has endured throughout all these years, leading up to today?
There's a naturalism in Tolkien's approach to describing the world that's there, and that quality in his writing where you are very comfortable in what he's giving you, and it doesn't feel like it's so far-fetched that you have to strain your imagination brain cells to get to that point. There is a very bag end, and sitting by the fireplace where Bilbo is having muffins and smoking his pipe and having, a look at the morning mail. That is the most comfortable place ever in anybody's life. It is. It's a natural place to be. And Tolkien knew how to make readers comfortable with these characters. And then he takes us out of the comfort and he, like Professor Tolkien said in his letters, he thought it was very amusing and very funny to make Bilbo uncomfortable by taking him out of his home and pushing him off into an unexpected adventure. And it was for his own private amusement that Tolkien did that, fish out of water type formula for building his story, which is an episodic children's tale, if nothing else. Keep in mind that The Wizard of Oz and The Hobbit were published in the exact same year, in the 30s. Yeah, that's right. 76 years ago, perhaps 77, if my math is wrong. And, anybody will tell you when they read The Lord of the Rings, they fall in love with the characters. They transition into that world as readers very easily, and therefore the power of his storytelling takes over, and the magic of what he's doing as an author takes over, because you're not so resistant to being there in this imagined place. You feel like it's a natural fit, and you go along with the characters, and you feel their plight, and you feel what sacrifices they're making, and by the end of The Lord of the Rings, even a grown man will close the book and be weeping like a little schoolgirl who just fell and scraped her knees. And I've heard confessionals from friends of mine and coworkers and friends who've actually admitted that. Like, they call me up on the phone and say, "Cliff, why am I weeping at the end of The Lord of the Rings?" So, and if you don't know why, you'll understand the second time you read it.
I know. I mean, I think for me, and maybe Ben, you can chime into this too, but I think what it's, I remember when I went to see the Return of the King, at the end of that movie, I was weeping. Even after, even when I read the book, it's still emotional. They're both equally, very emotional stories, And another thing, that kind of gets to me about Lord of the Rings is that depiction of that strong, very strong depiction of a very, masculinity that I really, really admire. Speaking as a Christian, I always love that image of that kind of, that biblical, masculinity being displayed on screen, that heroic nature and, courage and, a sacrificial willingness to that person or to these characters. And that's why I think Lord of the Rings has always stuck with me and, for such a long time. Ben, do you want to chime in a little bit about?
Oh, I mean, not too much. I mean, it's one of the things I noticed that sets Tolkien apart is his deep understanding of good versus evil and just how that fits into storytelling, and how he utilizes it to slowly raise the stakes as we continue through the story. The stakes get higher and higher, and it really draws you in. I mean, honestly, the first book, Fellowship, took me quite a while. It was hard getting into.
It's a slow start, isn't it?
It does.
Yeah.
He loves putting rich detail into his books, and it can take a little bit, but once you're past that, you're thrilled that he puts that detail in there because it gives you a breather. And yeah.
By the time you get to the Prancing Pony Inn,
exactly.
After you've left Tom Bombadil behind, things really start to rev up with the story, right? Yeah.
Poor Tom Bombadil. He doesn't make it into any interpretation. Not even the radio show, for goodness sake. Which that's a good show, by the way. Just a couple more questions. How did you get connected with the OneRing.net?
When they started getting news stories and spy reports from New Zealand back in October of 1999, when New Line Cinema made their big splash page announcement in Daily Variety, I was working at the time for the web developer and web historian who did Ian McKellen's website, the world-famous McKellen.com. Mm-hmm. So that was my day job. I was working at McKellen.com with the web developer. His name is Keith Stern, and we found out that New Line Cinema had something big up their sleeve by bringing a lot of money into this untested and unknown Kiwi director that we'd never heard of before. Mm-hmm. And at the time, Ian had not even been cast yet by Bryan Singer to play Magneto. That had not yet happened at the time. And then all of a sudden, one phone call, one fateful afternoon, around the same time the OneRing.net was a place I was visiting as a fan, they put a posting on their website saying, "We're looking for new writers and new fans to be contributors to this web community." Then I get a phone call from the folks at McKellen.com saying, "Can you keep a secret?" And I said, "Are you kidding?" After a brief email, back and forth with the OneRing.net, I became a writer and just started contributing. That's all. It was very simple. But I said to Keith Stern on the phone, "How can I keep this secret?" Because Ian had just been cast as Magneto, and he had been cast as Gandalf at the same time.
Oh, wow.
And Keith said to me on the phone, "Our lives are about to change. You know this." And I said, "Yes." I said, "Ian's life is going to change, and so is mine." And then Keith said, "Perhaps we could have a symbiotic relationship with the OneRing.net where you could work with me and not have a conflict of interest. And perhaps we can directly feed some good details and some, judiciously chosen behind-the-scenes things without ruffling feathers at New Line Cinema. And we can get stuff right from McKellen.com from my day job, and I could email things over to the One Ring and see what they could do with it as far as, titillating the fans and giving them a glimpse of things." And so I ended up being the man in the middle of that relationship. And then I started writing a lot of content for the One Ring, and we started a little online magazine called Green Books. And Green Books was a great contribution with several writers and Tolkien historians, one of whom is actually still a secret person whose name I've never revealed, who's a pretty big name in Tolkien historian world, and that academic world. And we put together Green Books as a great online learning place where there were articles and conversation for different aspects of studying Tolkien and what we thought made basically what we were afraid Peter Jackson was going to do. We were all very anxious and very fearful at the time. We had not seen any of that early Cannes footage, that special 12 or 15-minute bit that Peter put together just for the film festival at Cannes that blew everyone away before the Fellowship was released in 2000. So many stories to tell, such a history about theonering.net, but let me just say, I wrote lots and lots of articles. They were collected into 2 volumes. So the Green Books has got 2 books, physical print books, out on the shelves. And then I went to work on a little documentary film that we did called Ringers, Lord of the Fans. Mm-hmm. So I became the producer and lead writer on that documentary. We took it to Slam Dance Festival and won the Audience Award. And then the next day we got a phone call from Sony Pictures. They wanted our documentary, and they released it around the world, and folks can enjoy it everywhere. It's on Amazon, it's on the iTunes Store, blah, 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 blah.
Any place where you can find a DVD, or that sells a DVD, find it there.
So, old 99-cent stores, all that good stuff. It was great. It was a great experience working with theonering.net, but now we're still in the heat of debate where fans are still not sure what the heck is going on with The Hobbit. So I feel like, things are much the same, but still we're here now in a different time.
Yeah, different time. Quick question. How long did you have to sit on the McKellen casting? How long did you have to sit on that before you could
I did. I sat on it, and as soon as New Line was ready to make their announcement, we mirrored our announcement at the same time. So I wasn't able to leak that. I was not able to.
Okay.
However, I brokered a deal with San Diego Comic-Con in the year 2000 where we managed to get Ian down there to visit. He had just finished all the shooting in Canada for X-Men, and he was taking a plane down to Los Angeles, and he only had a few hours that afternoon before he would get on the next plane and go to New Zealand and start his very earliest shoots with Peter for Fellowship of the Ring. That you're not going to believe this, but they wanted to surprise the fans, and this was back before Comic-Con, imploded and ate itself. Mm-hmm. This was, back in 2000, and it was such a surprise. Ian showed up during the New Line Cinema panel when they were first showing tidbits of Fellowship and talking about the project for the first time, and the wave of fan response was just crazy in that room. You can't imagine. This was before Hall H was even built as a structure.
Oh, wow.
It's amazing how much Comic-Con has changed, but that's another story for another podcast.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, well, if we ever do the Lord of the Rings trilogy, you can talk about that, but that's really cool, man, just to hear that kind of stuff.
It's great.
Yeah, it's really cool.
I feel like I've been somewhere at the very nascent beginning of online Tolkien fandom, and I've been through its process of growing and maturing, and now, the interactions are all changed now with different levels of social media. It used to just be message boards when we started 15 years ago, and now it's a whole new world of, Instagram and looking at Graham McTavish put selfies up on his Twitter feed. It's just the world. Yeah. It really is.
Yeah, seriously.
Now, when looking back at the past, 15 years or more of, working with theonering.net, what is the one accomplishment that you're the most proud of that doing with the website?
Definitely. Besides getting cooperation and initial funding from theonering.net to do my documentary film, which I'm still very proud of. The other thing that theonering.net is proudest of is their Oscar parties. These huge gala events that we produce here in Los Angeles that have, black tie and formal gown affair for all the fans to come and, be at an Oscar party themselves, because inevitably the Oscar nominees and the Oscar winners, they hop over a couple of blocks away from where the Oscar ceremony is held, and they come and mix and mingle with the fans and create a very, very special, heightened experience for them as they celebrate the filmmakers and their achievements, especially our Return of the King Oscar party, which was, something really, really, a party of special magnificence, to borrow a phrase.
Yeah, people,
really great.
Am I wrong in saying that Peter Jackson and everybody just showed up unexpectedly?
They did. They did. I've been the MC for all of these parties, and it was the greatest pleasure that I had ever in my life as a host to bring all those guys out on stage, all holding their Oscars, with Howard Shore and visual effects director Jim Rigel, who recently did excellent work on Godzilla.
Yes.
And then not just Jim and the effects team, but all the actors and all the folks, the writers and the producers, and Mark Ordesky, of course, on stage with us, who just brought us The Quest on ABC, and so much talent, all in one place at one time. And at that time, Peter, everyone was there except Annie Lennox, believe it or not. Every single person was there. And Kate Blanchett, she was the only person besides, everyone else was there. And I'm just amazed to hear Peter say, let's not shut down the One Ring, not just yet, while he's waving his Oscar above his head for Return of the King. They swept every category that night. It was a complete thrill to be at that party. And Peter said, let's not shut down the One Ring just yet. Let's talk about The Hobbit. And everyone went, ah! There was a microwave and radiant pulsar explosion in the universe at that point in time when he said that. And then The Hobbit went into stasis and had production hell and turnaround for many, many years. In which time we were all going back to our VHS tapes and looking at Ralph Bakshi's The Lord of the Rings. That's what we were doing.
While we were waiting for that first shot of the Hobbit to be filmed, we were all just like, well, we might as well just go back to that animated movie and watch it then. One last question before we start a review. With the Hobbit films, coming to an end this Christmas, and apparently no Silmarillion TV show in the foreseeable future. What can you tell us? What can you tell us about the future for the OneRing.net? Since all these things are coming to an end,
Indeed, not while Christopher Tolkien is still guarding the treasure trove, like Smaug, resting and guarding watchfully on his treasure. No Silmarillion is going to be adapted anytime soon. It's too bad, because that material, the Silmarillion, is Professor Tolkien's richest material, and it is the darkest and most tragic and most really, really serious mythology building that you'll have on this side of Scandinavia. I know you guys know what I'm talking about. The future of the OneRing.net is very bright indeed, because everyone is still interested and very, intellectually inquisitive about Tolkien, and everyone's looking at what the third Hobbit film will be, and then there's going to be a bigger conversation about Peter Jackson's overall hexology of 6 films altogether. And we're going to have to look at these films of a piece after they're all done. But fans are more interested in, further adaptations, and the OneRing.net is still going to provide any coverage of other video games or other content or other adaptations that might appear. From time to time there's a ballet or a stage production or a parody musical like Fellowship with the exclamation point. Every now and then there's some great artists who pull something, another magic rabbit in front of their sled, and they, produce another interesting look at Tolkien's work. And most of all, we're getting ready to do, public events and show ourselves at conventions. The OneRing.net is encouraging fans around the world to do their Frodo and Bilbo Baggins joint birthday parties, which are coming up on September 22nd.
Cool.
And we're doing a public picnic in Los Angeles like we do every year, a huge thing with hundreds of people. And my good friend Sala Baker, who was the character Sauron in the Lord of the Rings films, and he played a couple of other big Uruks. Yeah, he did.
Cool.
We're going to see if he can surprise the fans and come to visit the Baggins birthday bash. But we like to promote events for fans and continue looking at Tolkien's works. The OneRing.net is going to be pretty active, even though the films will be done. But I guarantee you the success of HBO's Game of Thrones is going to cause the Tolkien estate to perhaps cast another eye, and maybe another critical eye, looking at their permissiveness and whether or not they'll let the Silmarillion be released from the strongholds of the draconian approach they have right now of not letting anybody have the Silmarillion. Maybe they'll relook at that. All of Tolkien's grandchildren and his great-grandkids, of course, Roy Tolkien, my friend, he's very keen on having the Silmarillion looked at as an adaptive source. But, the old guard is still the old guard, and they're not going to touch it for now.
Okay. Yeah, before we go into I know it's been going long, but hey, this is Lord of the Rings. It's epic, so this is going to be an epic-sized podcast.
I'm down for epic. If you guys want to go epic, I will bring you there.
Okay, yeah.
All right.
But it's Monday night. We got work tomorrow, so we can't go too long.
Yes, indeed.
No, but anyway, but Silmarillion, I've always said from the beginning, like, I can't see that being turned into a movie. It is just way too big. It's way too long. It's like trying to say, hey, we're going to make the Bible, because that's what I compare it to. Like, Silmarillion is almost like the Bible in its length and its just richness and detail. That is just one of the most...
Indeed. That's an astute observation. Yes.
So I could only see it working as like a TV show. That's all I can see it. And have you ever asked Peter Jackson that question about like if he would be interested in being an executive producer on if it was ever to happen, for the Silmarillion?
I've interviewed him so many times I've forgotten whether I've asked him that question or not. Isn't that embarrassing? I think the man said unequivocally when he was done with the Lord of the Rings, he was ready to give Middle Earth a rest, and that's why Guillermo del Toro was, his choice to be director of The Hobbit originally. When it was supposed to be a 2-film project, that's a whole nother podcast.
Yeah, that's another podcast.
But no, I don't think that Peter would mind being executive producer at all, because at this point he has said, I feel some sort of guardianship in a larger, context over this type of work, because I've put so much into it. I might as well, have some sense of ownership in that sense. He's, it's an anthology. The Silmarillion is not a standalone story, and like the Bible, it is a collection of smaller stories that tell a much bigger story and has a bigger impact as a whole, and it covers a very, very big historical swath of time, many thousands of years.
But Ben, have you read the Silmarillion?
I was actually about to confess that I have not.
Oh, okay.
I found it at Goodwill a couple weeks ago. I picked it up. It's like, man, I really need to read this. So it's been sitting on my shelf just waiting for me to read, and I just haven't had time yet. I tried reading Tolkien's Lost Tales. I couldn't get through that. That was just it wasn't.
You'll have an even harder time getting through the Silmarillion.
Yeah. So yeah,
it's not an easy read.
I've heard very good things about the Silmarillion. I need to sit down and just try getting through it. So.
I would say it's the ultimate Shakespearean Greek tragedy.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I honestly had the greatest time reading the appendix and everything at the end of Lord of the Rings. So I'm sure I'll get into it, but
okay,
I have the time. Yeah.
Have you read Children of Hurin, Ben?
No.
That is a depressing book. If you thought Jane Eyre and all that other stuff was depressing, that book is very depressing as well. Have you read it, Cliff?
Yeah, I'm in agreement with you, Chris, that there's so much, since we are talking about the Silmarillion, and how do you recommend the Silmarillion to a friend? There's always a good conversation among Tolkien fans, because you'll hear them say, it's an amazing read, and Chris, you're correct, it's very powerful, and very, very tragic, like the Children of Hurin is also really tragic, hardcore, capital T tragedy. But, you also have to say, caveat, even though it's a recommended read, you're going to have a hard time reading it because of the style of the way it's written. And that reflects the problem that Tolkien had when he was alive. He tried to get it published. After the success of the Hobbit book, his publisher said, why don't you give me some more material? And Professor Tolkien said, here, I've got all these books that I'm putting together for the Silmarillion. Wouldn't you like to publish this? Wink, wink. And his publisher said, oh my gosh, I can't read this. It doesn't, there's these confusing names and very dry histories of genealogies of elves and the nations of dwarves and I don't see any hobbits in this book. and his publisher rejected the Silmarillion. Until his dying day, it broke his heart that Tolkien could not get the Silmarillion finished or published the way he wanted it to. And so he took 17 years to write The Lord of the Rings as a sequel to The Hobbit.
Yeah.
And that was because his publisher insisted on something different from the Silmarillion. And we have to say a big thank you to Christopher Tolkien,
Yes.
who, posthumously edited and put together the manuscripts so that the Silmarillion could even exist at all.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's go ahead and get into our review after 20
Yes.
minutes of talking. Let's go ahead and just get into our review now.
I love it.
Before I get to you, Cliff, Benjamin, this was your first time watching it, right?
Yes.
What are your impressions?
Oh, this is going to be interesting.
Well, mixed. Honestly, I have to give it a lot of credit for helping Peter Jackson put together what is honestly the best rendition I've ever seen or heard. But at the same time, it was taxing to get through the mixing of mediums. I mean, I honestly wish he'd kept one style or the other instead of mixing the mediums like he did. I mean, the animation that they did was amazing, and I'm assuming, I have not looked it up, but I'm taking a stab that they probably drew over actual actors, and that's why it's so fluid. And it was amazing animation.
They shot a lot of live footage in Spain, and then they did a rotoscoping process and animated each cell over a photographed print of what they'd shot. Yeah,
that's what I figured. Yeah, and it was amazingly fluid animation, and that was telling. But at the same time, it was hard to follow because it's like, okay, now we're getting really dark, and it's like I'm trying to make out characters. Is that a person or is that a bush? And
who did you mistake for a bush?
Both.
Are you referring to Samwise Gamgee?
It's just the mixing of the mediums. It took a little bit getting used to.
It does. It's a very unusual, form of animation. It's just so experimental. At the time it was made, there was nothing else like it.
Mm-hmm. No, and I congratulate him for doing that. It's just not my personal taste. At the same time, I struggle to say this. Cause I've met people for Ender's Game. I met people who read the book and then saw the movie and said, "Oh man, how could you understand that in the movie? They didn't do it right." And I'm sitting there and I didn't read the book. It's like, well, I understood it just fine. They did it well in the movie. So I'm on the other end now. It's like, well, I read the book and I saw the movie and I don't think they told it well. I think they made it confusing. So I have a hard time saying that it's confusing because I don't know if it really was or not.
Okay.
Some stuff, to me, it didn't seem clear unless you had read the books.
Okay. Well, and also you've been so used to the superior versions, the live action movies as well. So it's was that kind of hard at times? Like, man, I'm watching.
Not really. I mean, yeah, there were scenes that's like, wow, Peter Jackson totally pulled straight from that. And then other times it's like, oh, this is nice, it's original. I appreciate this version of it. But yeah.
Okay. Who should I go with? Cliff, why don't you?
That is. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I was just going to say that is the greatest common denominator among people who see this film. I really wanted to love Bakshi's work, and I was intrigued by it more than I was really entertained by it. Is that fair to say, Benjamin?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a good way to say it.
Do you want to go off with your impressions of the film, Cliff?
Well, I watched it as one of those early young audiences. I was, let's calculate. I was 10 years old when I saw this film in theaters.
Oh, right.
And I was so blown away by seeing my favorite book, The Lord of the Rings, actually visualized in any way whatsoever. I mean, even though I thought that it was too condensed. When I was 10 years old, my first thought was they condensed so much to squeeze into this little film, and they didn't even finish the bloody story.
Exactly. That was my thought. No, I was watching it online, and it got to the end. And I sent a Facebook message to Chris. I said, "Is that it? I mean, am I missing something? Is that really all there is?"
It's the same reaction that people had when they first saw it. But so you saw it in the theaters, cool. So you were around when it was about to be released. The marketing for this movie, was it pretty big? Was the marketing campaign for the movie pretty big, if you recall?
There were stories in Reader's Digest on the magazine. You'd be standing at the grocery store at the checkout counter looking at tabloids and magazines, and oh look, there's Reader's Digest with Frodo on the cover and John Hurt's version of Aragorn. And although I was a kid, I didn't know who John Hurt was. I didn't know that I would be amazed by him in The Elephant Man and V for Vendetta, all these future movies. You know, he's Ollivander.
Horrified.
He's Ollivander, for heaven's sake. You know, I had no idea that John Hurt would be. But then again, I was just looking at it thinking, holy cow, somebody actually decided to make The Lord of the Rings. And I thought as a kid that little tiny square in the newspaper was not big enough. I thought United Artists would buy a bigger square for advertising the movie. Well, no, but they didn't. And I was really grateful to find one movie theater in Daytona Beach, Florida, where I grew up. I was really grateful to find one theater that had it. And the auditorium was nearly half empty. Believe me, less than half empty. And I went to a matinee, and there was some other kid from school who was, 5 or 6 rows ahead of me. And when, Gollum would float by on a log at one scene in the film with his arm draped over that river log, I could hear the kids, 4 rows down from me going, "My precious." So I knew there were other kids in the theater who were as into it as I was into it. But it was just the novelty of the thing. And I got to say, I grew up having that rather nostalgic slant on looking at the film. Now that I'm, published as a Tolkien writer and do movies about Tolkien fandom and have this other prism through which I look at Professor Tolkien's work, and I've studied it so much more now, I look at Bakshi's adaptation of the film through the eyes of the writer Peter S. Beagle, because all you Last Unicorn fans out there know that this story of Lord of the Rings, the entire thing that we see, was not Bakshi's adaptation. It was Peter S. Beagle who wrote those words and created this adaptation. So, you have to talk about it in that light. Bakshi was trying to focus on a team of 600 artists that he could not control. And it also seemed, as you watch the Lord of the Rings version, you see that the director is trying to not lose control of the whole thing by the time he gets to the third act. We have to admit. But I'm fascinated by how much more fidelity to the original book. Peter Beagle's script seems to have way more fidelity than the current scripts we have from Fran Walsh and Philippa Boyens and Peter Jackson, to be honest.
Okay. Okay. My impressions. Here's the funny thing too. I think this, I came across it around the time that the Peter Jackson movies were coming out, and I think that's what prompted Warner Brothers to kind of say, hey, to distribute it, to get it out there, say, hey, we got this other thing out there, maybe we can make some money off of it. And I saw it, and I didn't hate it, but I was like, this is peculiar. This is very different from what, I'm used to, the superior live action film versions. But I've got to say, as the years have gone by and the more I've developed more of a film critic mindset, it is actually a very admirable, adaptation of the Lord of the Rings book, specifically the first 2. I mean, it kind of does a small percentage, or somewhat of a pretty 50% percentage of Two Towers, but we'll get into that a little later.
Yes.
But I felt like it had some. I thought that it was actually a pretty strong movie, actually, in terms of storytelling wise. I didn't see any flaws. My criticisms lie within 2 specific areas: certain characterizations, I should say, and and certain visual presentations of how Bashki went about doing specifically like the orcs. But I really like this movie a lot. I love the Leonard Rosenman score. I thought the soundtrack is actually really, really solid. And it kind of it kind of had the score had this kind of 1950s biblical epic Ben-Hur type of feel to it that I really, really liked. I'll
agree with you on that. The score has some pretty interesting stuff going on with it. And Leonard Rosenman, believe it or not, will still refuse to admit to this day, he still refuses to say that he copied himself. But you know, the score for Lord of the Rings is something that he copied. The main leitmotif, he copied it for Star Trek IV: The Voyage Home. Did you know that?
No, that is weird.
Yeah, the opening theme is dun 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 dun. You know, from Bakshi's Lord of the Rings. You'll hear watch the opening credits to Star Trek IV. Mr. Leonard Rosenman copies his leitmotif exactly, and he still refuses to admit it today. It's funny, but it's true. One of those little connections that most people don't know.
Well, Ben, this is something for you to take into. So, take a note of that. You're the bigger Star Trekkie. You're a Star Trek fan, right, Ben? Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So take that down. You know, Leonard Rosenman.
I have to watch for that now. Listen for that.
Leonard Rosenman and the music publisher published straight piano sheet music of the theme from The Lord of the Rings. It's one of the rarest collector's items out there, and I had it, and I learned how to play it on the piano when I was 12.
Oh, cool.
And so I know that melody, and I'm a huge Star Trek fan, so years later, much to my surprise, I'm sitting in the theater watching Star Trek IV, the bad one that William Shatner directed, right? I'm like, what is that? It's the score for The Lord of the Rings. And my eyes and my ears just went, what? What the heck is that? I'm not kidding. You guys look it up. You'll find out it's true.
Okay, well, we should do that. And actually, when I was listening to it, the beginning march at the title scenes, it kind of reminded me of The Great Escape. There was like dun 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 dun. I'm like, wait a minute. Since when did Lord of the Rings become The Great Escape? Is Steve McQueen going to be in this movie, driving a motorcycle or something like that? Great movie, by the way.
It is a great movie.
Yeah.
Rosenman's stuff at the Battle of Helm's Deep and that choral work that he does near the end of the film is really great. It's good.
I also
I honestly didn't really notice the score that much. I mean, I noticed it was a smaller orchestra, obviously, compared to other film scores these days that are very big and epic and almost too epic for their own good.
Mm-hmm.
But that final piece there is like, wow, that really fits. That's, it's filled with sorrow and hope, and it was really fitting for that particular scene.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you guys are thinking about the same scene that I'm thinking about, where Theoden agrees to Aragorn's urging that he'll ride out, and then they look and realize they're completely hopelessly surrounded by tens of thousands of Uruk-hai, and the score does some very interesting and delicate bits there. It's kind of cool. Yeah, I like that bit. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's go in. Let's talk about a little bit about does it work as an adaptation of the books? I think we may have talked a little bit about this, but Cliff, what do you think? Does it work as an adaptation of specifically the first two books, since it never did the third one?
It does very little to effectively work. It really, honestly, now, even though I enjoyed it as a kid, I have to admit, the adaptation screenplay, Peter's work on the script, it works to the degree of getting us from point A to point B, it becomes a little bit mechanical from time to time because we don't spend any time in the Shire at all. We go straight from that dark red, blood red 4-minute or 5-minute prologue, which Peter Jackson would delighted himself in copying, and then we go straight to Bilbo's birthday party, and we go straight into Bilbo's birthday speech. Bam. We don't spend any time with Gandalf arriving, with the cart of fireworks, the introduction of Frodo. There is no introduction of Frodo, period, in the film. It doesn't work when I look at it like that. And then there's some parts of it that work exceedingly well when the ring wraiths arrive at Weathertop. The attack on Weathertop is exceptionally done. Bakshi shows his greatest strength when trying to show a standoff. As an animator, animation is always filled with activity, lots of activity, and I think Mr. Bakshi was really proud of himself for the rotoscoping and that posterizing that you guys don't like very much, where it looks like real colored photography, and that posterizing is the weirdest thing to look at, but Peter Jackson, lifts little bits and little set pieces from the way Ralph Bakshi does it, and you'll notice them from time to time, but the bit at Weathertop and that standoff as they make the flight to the ford is really good because animators they're usually busy trying to animate and keep things busy on screen, and sometimes Bakshi brings it down to a quiet standoff between one Nazgul on a horse and one Frodo on a horse, and it plays with a lot of tension, and the tension builds very nicely, and I think it works. So it's a mixed bag, and your response to it, Benjamin, is pretty spot on. It's a mixed bag. It really is.
And that's what I would say too about kind of tying to my general opinions. It's a very mixed bag film. I think it has some really good strengths, but I think it's a mixed bag. But Benjamin, do you think it works as an adaptation of the books?
Honestly, not really. It again, it's too compressed. It misses critical details, and it really doesn't draw you into the story. It's like, okay, I'm just watching it, traverse along, but I'm not invested in any of the characters or what they're doing, and it takes me a little bit to even figure out why they're doing that.
Yeah.
It's too compressed to really communicate the depth of Tolkien's story.
Yeah,
honestly.
Definitely.
But that being said, it was fun to watch, and it's it obviously inspired and helped Tolkien.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, not Tolkien. Peter Jackson. I like. There's some scenes when the Nazgul walk into the inn there, and they're standing around the beds. It's like, wow, this looks identical to Peter Jackson's version.
It does.
I'm thinking of like the one part that I'm thinking of that specifically fits that the Peter Jackson influence, or Peter Jackson was influenced by. I'm thinking of the scene when the three hunters scene when they're running across Rohan. That animated bit right there. That's actually a really good little 1 minute of animation right there. And I like and speaking of the music, I actually like the little subtlety of the music. Like it's trying to build up to something more grander, but it's just it's slowly just soft, and it's like dun 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 dun, that type of thing. And
I agree with you guys. You can hold Bakshi to account for a really brave effort for visualizing this world.
Oh yeah,
with his usual choice of really dark saturated colors. The Frank Frazetta sensation that Bakshi was feeling, even though he says that there was no Frazetta influence on Lord of the Rings. It's all over Fire and Ice, which was another animated rotoscoped film that Bakshi did, which is very specifically a project he worked on with Frank Frazetta. But Bakshi succeeds in giving us a visual look and some real good sumptuousness. And then all of a sudden we get roadblocks in watching and appreciating this film because Gollum doesn't work. The confrontation between Saruman and Gandalf doesn't necessarily work because Saruman is changed to Aruman because the studio interfered and said people are going to be confused between Sauron and Saruman, so let's pronounce his name differently. And The interference from United Artists is one of the big reasons why you have a narrative failure with the end of Bakshi's production. It doesn't even say Part 2. His original deal with the studio was supposed to be Lord of the Rings Part 1. The way that we nowadays think of Kill Bill Volume 1, Volume 2. And everybody ahead of time was supposed to know this. But United Artists was deeply convinced that they could not get an audience to come see the film, and they thought it would be an epic marketing problem if they said Lord of the Rings Part 1, and so they refused to do it. They didn't even mention it, even though they promised to Ralph Bakshi over and over again, we're going to put Part 1 at this stage on the posters, and they just didn't do it. And so people walk out of the film being confused and thinking, what the heck? Like you guys did.
Yeah, and speaking of the success, I mean, or money, I'm actually looking at the box office return. It made a pretty good, solid bit of money. I mean, it made like over $30 million on a budget of $4 million. That's pretty successful. Now, I don't know if it was one of those movies where the success or it took a long time to make that money. Sometimes, so sometimes it might take a little bit, like it was a sluggish type of success where the money was coming in or something like that. I don't know what happened back then, but it just, to some degree, it justified at least warranting, financially at least warranting a sequel. And I don't think the sequel would have probably cost that much. Maybe.
No, but it's funny how decisions are made differently now in the movie business. I mean, this is a great example. Nowadays, Warner Brothers is delighted to split the last Harry Potter film into two. They think it's and Hunger Games, they're delighted to split the third book into two.
I know it's getting tiring.
Yeah, they think, oh yeah, let's they take The Hobbit, which was going to be Del Toro's double movie. Now Peter Jackson's happy to expand it to 3 because everybody knows they can shake their moneymaker a little bit longer. Now, back then, in 1978, United Artists said, oh, no. We're not going to say this is only Volume 1 of Lord of the Rings. We're not even going to do that. And they promised Ralph, and he's been quoted in many interviews saying, they really screwed me over. The studio did. Yeah. And he went on to do a lot of other things. The biggest disaster in history was Cool World with Brad Pitt and Gabriel Byrne. You guys remember that, don't you?
I never saw that, so.
Oh no, really? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, Kim Basinger, Brad Pitt, Gabriel Byrne. It's a must-see train wreck. You have to see it.
Okay.
You have to see it.
Now, kind of, I've noticed that like in the past 15 years, on the website, thewondering.net, there's been very little lack of information on the website because at least that I've noticed, there's been like very little interviews with like any of the cast and crew with the film. Is there a lot of resistance from the staff at Wondering towards this film, or is it a movie that people at Wondering kind of like it or hate it mentality, or is it a very split mentality over there at Wondering?
Oh, yeah, all the staff who work at thewondering.net, it's not for lack of trying. I mean, when I was making Ringer's documentary, I was always trying to get through to Ralph, but I was making the mistake of trying to get through directly to Ralph with his email. I should have been dealing with his son, who at this stage in the game is much, much more engaged with promoting his father's work and helping them sell prints from the old animation cells and background paintings and things. I've always tried to interview Ralph and never had the chance successfully to get him on my site or on my live webcast, which I'm down to try again. Believe me. I just had a nice Twitter interaction with Ralph's son just a little while ago. He posted up a great image of the flooding of the river Bruinen, where Frodo is by himself making his last stand against the Ringwraiths, and then the horses appear in the foam and the waves of the river as the river comes and sweeps all the Nazgul away. And Ralph posted that I'm not sure it was Ralph, I think it was his son. He posted that great image of that climactic moment when the horses' heads come right over and they're about to crest the wave and swoop down. And and it's really great to start a dialogue with them online, and I'd be more than glad to give them more coverage. But any of the old school volunteer workers at theonering.net will say it's better left buried. A lot of say that the Bakshi film is better left buried. I'm continually fascinated by it.
Oh,
let me tell you a story. In development on Ringers, we found out that David Carradine wanted to talk to us, and we weren't sure why. He had just finished filming all the work with Tarantino for Kill Bill, and he had just come back from China, and he was still wearing that amazing alligator jacket. I don't know if it was snakeskin or alligator, but he was wearing that same jacket from Kill Bill, and he sat down with us, and David said that he was involved with the hippie movement in the 60s and the way the counterculture in Southern California embraced Tolkien, and that new wave of fandom was born all around that culture. And the youth culture, they were in Venice, they were living in teepees on his front lawn. It was like a love-in, you know, and there was lots of psychedelics and lots of rock and roll and all that stuff that they were doing at the time. And David said, I became aware of Ralph Bakshi wanting to adapt The Lord of the Rings, and they announced it in the trades, in The Hollywood Reporter and in Variety. And Bakshi said, I've got to be in this film. I wanted to play Aragorn. And so we've got this footage of David Carradine admitting on camera that he was so compelled to play Aragorn that he marched himself right down to the studios to have a meeting, and he stormed into Ralph's office while he was busy working on pre-production and pre-viz. The term would eventually become industry standard, pre-viz. And he had a meeting with Ralph Bakshi and showed his concerns to him and said, I really want you to consider me and have me as your lead, as Aragorn. And Bakshi showed Mr. Carradine all the stuff that he was doing and all the artwork, and that was the first realization that David Carradine had. It was going to be animated, not a live-action film.
Yeah.
And he was shocked, and he really tried to convince him to not even animate the thing at all. It's like, please, just shoot it live. That's all you need to do. Trust me. And he petitioned him so strongly. And now we have a mirror image of this. You know, if you're a Gen Y or Gen X, you know that when Tim Burton was about to do his follow-up to Batman, he was petitioned to Sean Young, who went crawling around the Warner Brothers lot in a Catwoman suit, trying to convince Tim Burton that she needed to be the role of Selina Kyle. So it was really great. And if you get a hold of Ringers, you know, you'll get to see the full interview with David. It's so great that Ralph Bakshi was determined to do it. He thought that this was the best way to get the most movement and the most animation on screen at the time, and have it really have a stronger, textured, and epic feeling. So he thought that rotoscoping all the live-action shots was definitely the way to go. Star Wars fans take note, the role of Bilbo and the role of Samwise, Bakshi had both of those roles photographed and shot in Spain with none other than Billy Barty playing the role. And everybody remembers Billy Barty in all the other films that he's done with Lucas and with Ridley Scott, and we've seen Billy Barty as our favorite little person in all these movies. There's a whole list of them. So it's really fascinating that you watch our version of Elijah Wood and Sean Astin, and our little hobbits do not look like little people, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's harder to take a visual. You don't take kindly to Ralph Bakshi's version as quickly because you're not looking at little, hobbits. You're very much aware as you watch Bakshi's version. You're watching little people, and that's why you can never imagine Samwise, that squishy little potato-faced Samwise, getting in a fight with a giant spider. You can't visualize. Billy Barty does this thing where he's waving his hands in front of his face and acting all flustered. And he gets all cute, and that little Samwise weirdness that you see Bakshi doing, you realize that, gosh, it could never play with a stronger theme of heroism. Now, could it really? So there's so much to talk about. I hate to babble on and on, but the more I investigate my nostalgic affection with Bakshi's film, the more interesting discoveries I make. In the land of Hollywood, where I live now.
Yeah.
I gotta ask you a question, by the way. How interesting! Your last name is Broadway, and you work in Hollywood. How interesting is that? Your last name is is the center of all the stage productions, and you work in the place of where all the films and TV shows are made.
You should look at any piece of mail that I have. I live on Hollywood Boulevard, so every piece of mail I have has the word Broadway and the word Hollywood at the same time on every every utility bill I get. It's just comedy to me. Yes,
that's cool.
Because it is altogether evil. It will corrupt and destroy anyone who wears it until he passes into the world of shadows under the power of Sauron, the Dark Lord of Mordor. Ash-Naz Dabatulu. Ash-Naz Gimbatul. One ring to rule them all. One ring to find them. One ring to bring them all. And in the darkness bind them.
Let's go ahead and go into characterizations and slash the cast members. Now, obviously, these roles have been made more iconic with the Peter Jackson movies.
Yes.
This is where I have the mixed feelings with. I'll tell you the characters I did like. I like Sam. I'm sorry. No. What am I saying? I liked Frodo. I really liked Gandalf, and no pun intended, but he was very animated in terms of his physical body.
Yes.
He was trying to be Laurence Olivier. This was an out of work actor, and he was just trying to pose as Olivier and do all those grand things, Hamlet wise. And then you know what? And I loved, even though he looked like a Native American, I like John Hurt's Aragorn.
The reason why is because Aragorn and Gandalf are, speaking so much direct dialogue from Tolkien, and that's one of the strengths of these characterizations. I really did like Aragorn as well. I did. Although it looked a little bit goofy in the Prancing Pony when he pulls out the broken sword, his inheritance from Isildur, and you don't even understand why you don't know any context about that sword, and it has no dramatic impact. Even though he very dramatically pulls the sword out and says that famous quote, "If by my life or my death I can save you, I will."
Yes.
And the dialogue works great. Aragorn, you really like him a lot. He's a strong character.
Very confident,
and of course,
very
it's just we don't get all the nuts and bolts of what we need to get to appreciate everything that they are showing us.
Yeah. Do you want to chime in, Ben?
Not too much. I only saw it once, so I don't feel very qualified to comment on that too much. But
it's okay. It's okay.
Yeah.
But
no, I honestly, nothing felt wrong to me. It worked as far as the voices and the acting went. I enjoyed it. It seemed to fit the style very well.
Yeah, and I liked and I like John Hurt's Aragorn because he very much it's comparing apples to oranges. I mean, Viggo brought a guy who seemed very who had a lot of weight on his shoulders, and that sense of should I take this burden up? Should I take this sword and embrace the my legacy? Aragorn in this movie, or in the animated movie, is a little bit more has a lot more authority and a lot more
I agree.
Confidence.
I agree, Chris. This Bakshi version of Aragorn, he asserts himself very plainly and much stronger, and doesn't seem to have any struggle at all. I didn't care much for the way the Argonath were represented in the animation, but I admired the way that Aragorn immediately, takes this very strong dose of uplift from seeing them, and the way that Aragorn is presented, it's key to understanding that character. The Argonath are not presented very well, but Aragorn is.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Now we got to talk about two characters I think have been somewhat controversial. Sam, let's just get him out of the way. I oh my gosh, I don't know. Well, I'm assuming that Bashki was trying to aim for humor with the character, obviously, and he may have gone presenting him more as a kind of he's going to be the comic relief. He has to look like a I don't remember who the fat one is, Abbott or Costello type of a characterization. Who's the fat one in that group? Is it Abbott or Costello? Who's the fat one?
That would be Lou Abbott.
Okay, Abbott. Okay, so he's kind of going for that kind of ridiculousness. But look, I love Sean Astin's portrayal. I even like Bill Nye's interpretation on the radio show. That is very good. And just a little trivia, he played Davy Jones in Pirates of the Caribbean, Ben, just to let you know.
Oh, okay.
Bill Nighy, believe it or not, has a direct connection to Bilbo Baggins as played by Martin Freeman, because the two characters have a great end scene in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy with Bill Nighy and Martin Freeman together. It's showing him all the universe and all the great details. It's, that kind of like that moment where you meet the Supreme Being and Time Bandits, and he explains everything for you,
Oh, that's cool.
Oh, yeah, Bill Nighy is a lovely, lovely character actor. Can't get enough of him. He can do no wrong. I'll agree with you on that.
Oh, yeah. But how did you guys feel about the Samwise Gamgee interpretation?
Terrible.
Yeah, it was...
Blunt.
Yeah, original. I mean, I kind of enjoyed it. It gave me something to look forward to. Some honestly,
well,
I enjoyed the humor of it.
But didn't you guys think that Samwise was completely oafish? And look at the interaction that Sam has with Gollum near the end of the film. Gollum, I think, we'll talk about him, I guess, next.
You can go ahead. Yeah, you can go ahead and talk about
because you look at Sam and Gollum's interaction in Peter Jackson's live-action films, and the severity there is palpable, and it even builds up to such a moment in Return of the King. But the Bakshi handling of that Gollum and Sam relationship, I think, is one of the poorest reflections of what's in the original Tolkien book. I can't say it works at all, and I don't get the idea that Sam and Gollum is very fey and very, non-threatening. I don't get it. I really just don't get it.
Yeah. No, honestly, I was going to say, concerning Sam, in the book, I can't wait. And honestly, next to Aragorn, Samwise is one of my favorite characters in the book.
Yeah.
Yes, always. Everyone loves Sam the most.
So it was a really strong character. It's like, man, why didn't Sam have the ring? He'd have done a better job. But the book explains very well that was not his role. He was not built for that. But anyways, and yeah, the 1978 version doesn't carry that and doesn't convey that part of Sam very well at all.
Yeah.
I'll agree with that.
And kind of pointing out what you said earlier, I mean, I don't see this Samwise Gamgee. If Bashki had done Return of the King, I don't see this Samwise Gamgee, this kind of a loaf type of character who's just a complete idiot going up against a big spider. He probably would have been like, "Oh, Mr. Frodo, I'm out of here!" Ah! He would have run away.
But I don't. With their choice and design, the character design himself doesn't even tend. I don't think you could animate it in a way where you could have a character designed that way be effective in any battle scene with anybody.
No. He would have been like a Jerry Lewis.
No, he looked like Chewie. He looked like Chewie from Chelsea Lately, running around, flapping his arms. It didn't work for me. But there's a bit more success in creating Gandalf. I agree with you. Merry and Pippin are non-entities.
They don't
entirely
serve much of a purpose.
They don't. A lot of contention still exists on the design of Treebeard and the way Treebeard
like a carrot stick. He looks like
a walking gray carrot. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
The guy behind you is agreeing with me. The guy in the picture behind you. He looks like John Travolta from Pulp Fiction or Men in Black. I don't know. But he's just nodding his head. It's like, I 100% agree with you.
Yeah, that scene was really jarring, actually. It's like, whoa, there's Treebeard. Wait, Treebeard? Really? It didn't flow into that scene very well. It was quite jarring.
Yeah. I actually probably liked Gollum in this one. And one, because I actually liked the voice actor who played him. I thought his voice. I thought the voice was really, really good, and I
Peter
think,
Woodthorpe.
yeah, I really liked his Gollum voice.
You do? Okay, I'm willing to listen.
But
I've always thought that if that Gollum doesn't provide a menace or a threat of some kind, then where are we going to go with the character?
I guess for me, the reason why I like it was because he was actually in the radio drama.
Yes. Familiarity.
Yeah, and I think in that one he's definitely they do the whole trilogy, but in that one he gets to play. He has a lot more meat, and you get to see the torment, and you even see the dark side. Like even in Mount Doom, you see the dark side in that sequence and in the voice. He brings a lot more creepiness and a lot more just a sense of uncertainty with the character. Obviously Andy Serkis did the superior job, but I actually liked his Gollum. Now the design I have mixed feelings on, because at one point in time it looks like something from a Disney movie, and then towards the very one of the final scene with Frodo and Sam before the battle, before the final charge at Helm's Deep, the animation there looks completely different, and it looks like he's just got out of a concentration camp. More horrifying looking. It's like, look at me, I'm shaking, I haven't eaten, like he's having a blood sugar lack of a blood sugar rush or something like that. I don't know. He didn't look good. I like the other animated scenes, but I did not like that final shot right there of him. Were you going to weigh in about the Gollum? Any of you guys?
Well, I have something to say about the first Gollum I encountered. Would be the one voiced by the dark comedy, the improv comedy guy who was doing things in Manhattan in the 70s. His name was Brother Theodore, and he was an underground comedian who had just the weirdest stage act that anybody had seen. There's a whole world of things that we don't know about with Brother Theodore, with such a secretive life and a personality that was as strange as the characters that he voiced. But he brought Gollum to life in the Rankin and Bass animated version of The Hobbit, and reprised the same role opposite Orson Bean when they did the animated The Return of the King, which pretty much finishes off the stuff that Ralph Bakshi leaves untold. Mm-hmm. And I'm so attached, way more interested in Theodore's work as the voice of Gollum than I am in what Peter Woodthorpe did. And maybe that's just my personal taste, certainly.
Yeah, preference, okay.
But I was very creeped out and interested in the Rankin Bass version of Gollum and that weird, gravelly German voice that he had.
Ben, you want to weigh in, or do you want to move on?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
Thanks, so.
Now we can kind of tie this in with the animation rotoscoping and kind of tying the characterizations in. But I really, really, really dug the ring wraith look. I thought if Bashki did one thing that was really solid, it was the interpretation of those, because those are some of the freakiest animated characters I've ever seen. I mean, I've always liked the red eyes. The red
me too.
I've always liked that on the ring wraith, and I've seen that on a lot of calendar paintings, that type of thing. And I've always I like that. I like what Peter Jackson did, because you don't see the face, but or you don't see anything at all, and you don't see any eyes, nothing like that. But when I look at these, I really am just haunted by those red eyes. Just looking at you, it's just it's almost like a devil.
You're 100% right on, Chris. Imagine the impact on a 10-year-old.
Yeah.
Seeing those ring wraiths.
Did it leave a bad impression on you when you were?
They're the most fully realized character designs, the ring wraiths, and it's really interesting to see Frodo put on the ring and transition from the regular world into the Twilight world that he's in when he wears the ring. And the way the ring wraiths are handled, the hissing and their voices, you don't need to hear the shriek. It's about their twisted, corrupt bodies, and the way they struggle to move off of the horse and walk towards the hobbits, sniffing for the ring in the distance. And it's a really, really great a bit of character design. No better depiction of evil for a child than a dark, dark, empty face with just evil, glowing red eyes in the darkness. Yeah. It's perfect.
I know.
It's great.
Ben,
I agree. I was thinking at first, it's like, wow, he's getting off the horse. He's so fragile. And as we slowly see more and more, it's like, wow, this is just evil realized. This is like straight from a nightmare where it's like, he seems so mundane and weak, but then by the end, it's like, okay, get me away. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I actually would have liked to have seen what Bakshi could have done with one of the ring wraiths in, Pelennor Fields, when they do the Eowyn, fight. That could have been kind of interesting to see. One of those type of ring wraiths going up against a fight. That could have been interesting. But we'll talk about that when we talk about Return of the King.
It could have been, yeah. But how about that? That always stands out. The fight at Weathertop always stands out as probably the one that rings truest to the original Tolkien.
Yeah, definitely,
and
definitely.
That's when Bakshi finds himself succeeding as a director with those, transitions between real world to spirit world, and all of a sudden you realize the peril is very real, and Aragorn with those the torch brands that he has, it's stuff that impressed a young Peter Jackson, impressed him enough that Peter Jackson always remembered those. And there's a bit of a visual tip of the hat, or maybe it's a really obvious tip of the hat when the ring wraiths are sniffing. When Frodo says, "Get off the road," and they hide under that big tree root. It's like shot for shot. That is Peter Jackson paying homage, I think.
Oh yeah. You could definitely see all those influences by from Bakshi to Peter Jackson. Now let's talk about we talked about this. Oh, and here's another thing. How do you guys feel about the orc design? I'm kind of mixed.
You mean the giant rats?
I was actually thinking of the Morlocks from that 1960s The Time Machine movie. Have any of you seen that one?
Oh yeah.
Yes, I do remember that. Yes.
They kind of remind me of those of the creatures from that movie to some degree. Even though here they kind of look a little bit more like, as you just said, rats. And it's somewhat unintentionally comical to look at. I mean, I love the voices. I actually found myself doing the voice earlier today, like.
Can't run. Bed and breakfast down at Isengard. Understand?
Whoa, dude, that's exactly what they sounded like. That's great. That is unbelievable. I mean, the orc designs are really kind of goofy. A lot of the Uruk-hai look like they have gorilla masks that have been wrapped up in mummy bandages.
The Tusken Raiders.
The Tusken Raiders. They look so weird looking. However, from a story point, it's actually more authentic to Tolkien because the Grishnak character goes over to Merry and Pippin while they're held captive, and he's busy looking around in their vest pockets and feeling to see if they've got a certain piece of jewelry on them. And that doesn't exist in Peter Jackson's film.
No,
it does in the book. And Peter didn't do it, but according to the way Peter S. Beagle faithfully interprets Tolkien, Bakshi has the fulfillment of letting the audience realize the ring is so powerful and so greatly desired, even the common soldiers among the orc military are even after it. Everybody's after it. And so, he succeeds in letting people know that the stakes in the story are going up from that point, just like Tolkien wanted it to be. But the orc designs themselves are a little bit ridiculous.
Yeah. How do you guys feel? Did you guys like the rotoscoping? Because that was one of the mixed thing that was kind of jarringly obvious that it didn't seem to be translating well onto screen, because it's like everything else around them is animated and cartoonish. These guys,
posterized, yeah.
It didn't feel fitting. like, I would have preferred if they had just kept that design and then just simply animated them. I don't know what happened. I mean, I don't know if you got anything.
Mr. Bakshi said that he was more interested in having realism on screen with the artwork and density. He was interested in the density of the image. He was not interested in whether contrast between 2D, black outline and colored within artwork would contrast or blow out wrong with photography that was, posterized. He wasn't interested in the clash of styles. He was interested in maximizing eye candy. That's really what he was trying to do. And that's how he's explained it. And to his credit, unlike a lot of other animators at the time of his generation, he was willing to experiment with visual styles. And that's why, we still have to give him credit for trying. Yeah. It looks really, really weird when you watch the soldiers of Rohan, because they just look like a bunch of hippies from, some joke. It looks like a chewing gum commercial where all the background actors all look like uniform hippies with blonde hair and little mustaches like the Leonard Skinner concert that you went to in the 70s. And you're thinking, what is happening here? And, it's like, just trying to make the genotype of the men of Rohan look like a common genotype. It makes the artwork look just so bizarre. You've got Aragorn looking like a completely different genotype than the men of Rohan, and then you've got the posterized weird orcs in the background that look like black and white photography. They still don't look like animation. They look like photography. And it's just a brave, really ambitious mix that you just have to ultimately say doesn't work, doesn't all around work.
Yeah, I mean, it was a clever idea and it was worth the effort, but it didn't. He didn't pull it off.
Yeah, I think that's one of the major negatives, and that's why I think the second act, because I think the first act of this movie is really good, and for some reason I think that the rotoscoping works for the Nazgul, but when you get into the second half, with all the Two Towers stuff, and maybe even the mind. Well, I don't know about the Mines of Moria. We'll talk about that maybe. But for the second half, I think it's weakened because of this animation that's so jarringly different, and it's not fitting in with the rest of it. By the way, do you know the Balrog? Was that a guy in a big suit? Okay. Oh, you were laughing at that, Ben.
I don't know for sure, but given the fact that the animation process included just tracing and drawing over on a cell everything that was photographed, I guarantee you they had some guy in a lion suit with a big Simba lion's head, and they put him up on ropes or some kind of apparatus, and they hoisted him up and they hoisted him down, and that's why he makes that simple triangular rising up and rises down. And with the wings, those wings being as literal as they were represented, you're left scratching your head wondering why he doesn't fly. The animation of the Balrog looks quite a bit different when you look at that lost footage, that clip that showed up about 6 months ago. Yeah, and there's scenes of Gandalf actually having a fight with the Balrog, climbing back up the stairs of Zirak Zagil, which is the dwarven name of the mountain they were in. It's just amazing that there's so many inconsistencies. As an overall project, it's pretty clear that Bakshi bit off more than he could chew, and his ambition overreached what he could physically manage to do with the production.
Yeah.
But I really, I still have to say, it was the only game in town. Just like what Peter Beagle said when we interviewed him, he wanted to write that script. It was the biggest thing in town, in Hollywood. Everyone was buzzing about this adaptation.
Really?
The fact that it passed hands from John Borman and now gone back over to Turnaround at United Artists, everybody was interested in what Beagle was going to do, and there were a lot of fans of The Last Unicorn out there. And Beagle, he had a pedigree, and his job was just to be as authentic to Tolkien as possible. You get a sense that everyone in 1978 wanted to embrace it. They wanted to love it more than they did, and that's why it stopped short of being a blockbuster, because the American counterculture was behind it. Those were the kids who were going to the movies under the influence of whatever they were doing at the time. It was Bakshi's game to lose with The Lord of the Rings, and I think it would have been a much better success theatrically if United Artists had not turned him over the way they did. Forgive my abrasive language, but
yeah, I think. Well, I was going to tie back into the Balrog. I know what the Balrog is right there. That's the MGM lion's soul after it was killed. Because I don't know. If as you could tell,
MGM lion.
Yeah, after they contacted his agent and said, "Hey, can we get the MGM lion up here?" It's like, "Yeah, sure. He could use the work."
Fly up the stairs, straight on. Fly. You cannot help me. You cannot pass. I am a servant of the secret fire. You cannot pass. Go back to the shadow.
Benjamin, you can sense by the way I talk that I have this certain attachment to the story.
Mm-hmm.
I've always wanted to see somebody adapt The Lord of the Rings the way I believed in it when I read it as a kid. The impact of Tolkien on a 10, 11-year-old mind cannot be underestimated.
No.
So when I went to the theater in 1978, seeing what Bakshi had accomplished was an amazing thing. It was amazing to see Frodo quietly say to the Council of Elrond, as quietly as he could, "I'll take it, even though I don't know the way." There's spots in the film that take your breath away when the Watcher in the Water comes and attacks Frodo, and they all try desperately to get inside the gates of Moria. And there's other parts of the film that are really flat and don't work, like the healing of Theoden. There's nothing kinetic in that scene at all about Gandalf healing Theoden and re-inspiring him. That doesn't work. But the things that did work were worth taking home with me as a successful bit of an adaptation. But to you've seen it from the other end, with having witnessed Peter Jackson's brilliant trilogy first. And then you go and see Bakshi's work as an afterthought. So no wonder you have a different appreciation.
Exactly. It's very difficult for me to get that same appreciation. Yeah, I agree. I agree.
Ben, do you want to close out with your thoughts?
I don't know if I'll bother seeing it again. It was worth seeing once, just for the history of it. But it's not something. It's not something. It's not something I'm really gonna go out of my way to try to own or whatever. I mean, for anyone who wants to have a well-rounded knowledge of Tolkien and how its adaptions have been attempted over the years, it's definitely a go-to and a reference. But it's not one I would really recommend otherwise.
Okay.
Yeah, right on. Well, you've got a never-ending party joke with nerd friends in the future, because you can always say, "Hey guys, did you know that Legolas was really C-3PO?"
Yes, there you go. I wonder if Anthony Daniels has been asked about this movie in his long career of doing Star Wars and all that stuff. For my closing thoughts, I like this movie. I mean, is it special to me? No. I mean, I when I look at the other, Lord of the Rings, I prefer the live action movies. But if I'm kind of interested, like, let me see what else is out there. This is a very, very admirable attempt at the story. And what's even more shocking is that this movie is like 133 minutes, which I think that was unheard of for an animated movie at the time.
Oh yeah, it was backbreaking for United Artists. They didn't know how to handle it. I mean, Bakshi was working so hard on it and burning through money like you wouldn't believe, and he turned in this project that was almost unwieldy. They weren't even sure what they could do with it. Yeah.
And But
it's expensive. It's
yeah, it's a very expensive movie. $4 million. That's not too bad in today's standards. But I'm sure today it would be more expensive. But yeah, I like this movie. I would probably say to people, like, would I recommend it? I would probably say, if you're used to the Peter Jackson movies, you may or may not like this movie. It could go either way. Every time I show it to my family, they're like, "Hey, that wasn't bad, but it was interesting,
It's different,
very different." And yeah, the polarizing reaction from people is kind of interesting to see comparing to what's going on nowadays. But I really like this movie. I give it a somewhat slight recommend, but it's up to you, audiences, to see if you like it.
I'd recommend it to Tolkien fans. I wouldn't recommend it to Peter Jackson fans.
maybe not. But anyway, yeah, that's going to do it for our review of Lord of the Rings, the 1978.
It's definitely worth visiting memory lane with this movie, because you have to appreciate that any director, anybody, whether it's Ralph Bakshi or John Borman, who ultimately ended up making his version of Lord of the Rings as Excalibur, the movie we know and love, any person who wants to take on an adaptation of Tolkien is really getting themselves into a thicket. And that's quite a lot to take on. It's always crazy when you think you can take J.R.R. Tolkien and make a good, filmic version of it. And so I'll say props to you guys, props to Peter Jackson and to Mr. Bakshi for even attempting it at all.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
But before we wrap up, guys, we gotta talk ourselves some Hobbit stuff right here, because we're, the next Hobbit movie is coming out. And if you're still listening to us right now, congratulations, you've made it through the longest episode of Story to Screen, because most of our other episodes are under 40 minutes or a little bit more.
Around the 50
minutes, yeah. Man of Steel was probably like our first big. Was like almost over an hour, but
well, you know what? If the conversation is engaging and if the people are loving it, then I'll say that's excellent. Next time anybody is in Los Angeles and they actually come to me and say, "I listened through the entire podcast with those guys, with Chris and Benjamin," I'm going to buy you a drink. If anybody comes to me, I'll buy the first round. Okay,
there you go.
There we go.
We'll see if this plays out.
And just raise.
I might regret saying this.
Raise a toast to us for that. Here's the Benjamin and Chris.
1420.
Yeah, there you go. But I got to ask you, Cliff, what is your mindset going to this next one? Because are you kind of like, oh man, I'm really feeling it. This is going to be the end of an era of the Lord of the Rings era or the Hobbit. This is going to be the end, like that same type of emotional feel that maybe you had when all of us felt, or when we felt when Return of the King was coming out, that emotional, like it's really finally coming to a conclusion. Or is it kind of like, it's another ride, it's coming, but that's it, it's nothing like special like the Return of the King was. What's your mindset?
I'm glad you asked. Nothing like being put on the spot, To tell you the truth, Mr. Chris and Mr. Benjamin, skeptical boy is skeptical. I want to be warmer, much warmer to the work that Peter is doing, but I was not pleased with Keeley having dialogue like, "Aren't you going to search me? I could have anything in my trousers."
Yeah.
That is, I loved An Unexpected Journey, even with, the slow parts, to use the appropriate expression, the longueurs of it all, the kind of thing that you appreciate about a Miyazaki film, when things slow down and breathe a little bit and take their time. I mean, the fact that AUJ, we call it AUJ, An Unexpected Journey, had so much fidelity to Tolkien, it was delightful for me to spend more than 50 or 55 minutes in Bag End before we even begin the bloody movie and get on our way. I mean, a lot of people complained about it, but I really liked An Unexpected Journey. I liked the tone that they took. I like the flashbacks where we learn about the Battle of Azunul Bazaar by way of Balin telling a nice flashback. And I liked a lot of it when Desolation of Smaug comes around. I was thoroughly aggravated with things. The fact that they did not kill the dragon by the end of the film was, a bit of a narrative blip that I'm not willing to forgive as far as narrative structure of a third act. You know, it was not a satisfying third act for me with, Thorin in that heroic wheelbarrow for several minutes. Whatever was going on there, I just kind of... I thought to myself, you might as well take Tolkien's name off of it because you've made such a departure from the Hobbit books. Mm-hmm. While you look at The Lord of the Rings, and there was so much more effort at fidelity, well, The Hobbit is not making the same effort at fidelity. Tauriel is an interesting concept as a character. The execution of the character is still leaving question marks with me because I see nothing but an echo chamber of Arwen at inappropriate spots of the story. But third film, third time pays for all. I'm willing to give Mr. Jackson and Fran and Philippa a chance to give us some real juicy bits. The nitty-gritty of seeing more Christopher Lee is the real reason why I'm going back to the theater. I don't really care about what happens to Bard in Lake Town. I really care about seeing Saruman. Yeah. And I want to see more of that character so we can understand his transition in Fellowship of the Ring a little bit better. We're going to have to look at all 6 movies all together, and I really want to see stuff in the Battle of the Five Armies that will feed the connections and the connective tissue to when we find Balin's tomb in the Chamber of Mazarbul. Yeah. I really want to see that stuff with Saruman. I want to see the Dwarven history connected to the Dwarven history as it's shown in Fellowship. But the time when you take, Gollum is so great. Gollum is always wonderful. Andy Serkis is genius. The fact that there is no Andy Serkis in Desolation of Smaug hurts the film, I think. Yeah. But we have the pleasure of dealing with the ultimate fate of the dragon, and then we have to deal with that weird, delicate relationship with Thorin and Bilbo and the Arkenstone. They have some potential in this third film to really deliver the goods as far as a Tolkien fan, a hardcore Tolkien fan is concerned, like myself. But they also have just as much opportunity to mess it up. Yeah. Highlight of the movie, I guarantee you, will be the arrival of Dane, Thorin's cousin, played by Billy Connolly. Yeah. He's going to steal the show. I tell you, more than anything, I want to see Saruman, more Christopher Lee, more Billy Connolly, and ultimately, you get to see Cate Blanchett in battle mode at the Battle of Dol Guldur. That will be interesting to watch. But I'm still kind of sitting on the middle of the fence still. Yeah, I got to be honest.
Yeah, Ben, do you want to talk about that? And
I'm honestly in the same place. The second film was okay. It was a fun ride, but that's all it really was. It did not deliver as well as the first one, and it felt the visual effects felt rushed, and they didn't fit. It didn't deliver in the end. It's like, whoa, wait, that's the end. Okay, I gotta wait a year now.
So the cliffhanger ending didn't entirely work for you, did it?
No, not at all. I sat there, it's like, whoa, we were just getting started.
Yes.
I was like, I'm ready for another 2 hours.
Yeah.
Well, they're ready to sell a year's worth of dragon toys. Now that they kept the dragon alive, we get to have all the toys and merchandise related to the dragon without it being a spoiler or reveal.
Exactly.
Cool news, by the way. Yeah.
So, it's mixed feelings. I have to tip my hat to Peter Jackson for doing an amazing job with Lord of the Rings, but I think he's kind of got it's the same thing George Lucas went through. He's got too much power now, and he doesn't have the accountability to keep him reined in.
Yeah. Prequelitis. We call it prequelitis.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's gonna be fun when we do our review. We'll probably talk about what's a better prequel, better prequel films, Star Wars or these films.
I don't know if there's competition.
We have one advantage, guys. As Star Wars fans, we can see episodes 1 through 6 straight away.
Mhm.
Conventional wisdom among the hardcore Star Wars community is that you can take a newbie who's never experienced Star Wars, and you can tamper with the order in which you show the 6
Mhm.
films. You can eliminate episode 1 entirely and not even show it to a noob, and they can get the perfect Anakin and Luke mega story.
Mhm.
And it's fascinating. You show them episode 4, A New
Mhm.
Hope, and then episode 5, Empire Strikes Back, and then you cut and do episodes 2 and 3
Mhm.
to learn about what Anakin's younger life was like, and then you come forward and wrap it up with the Return of the Jedi as episode 6, and there you go. You've skipped episode 1 entirely. Now, are we going to have the same conversation with the whole hexology of Middle Earth films after Peter has got his 6 films out? Because we really are going to have to look at them as of a piece.
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, that's where I do enjoy what Peter Jackson has done with pulling in references to Lord of the Rings. I didn't expect that, and I really enjoyed that. I'm looking forward to how he does that. But
Yeah, but is the appearance of the Ringwraith attacking Radagast with a very brief moment, is that less effective because you watch Hobbit movies before you watch Lord of the Rings movies, and therefore when you see the Ringwraith in his Twilight form attack Frodo at Weathertop, is it different? Is it impactful any less or any more? We're going to have to ask these questions after the Battle of the Five Armies is out and we see all the connecting threads together.
Yeah.
We're going to have to wait a bit.
Yeah. I think for me and my mindset, I'm kind of like I'm kind of like, okay, here's another ride, because that last one just left such a dour taste in my mouth, and Ben was a witness to this. It was funny because
that was an interesting review.
Yeah, it was fun because we were so positive with the first Hobbit movie, and I was like, I really like this one. I think it's got problems, but I'm willing to overlook the problems because the good stuff that won me over was so good. And another thing,
still a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I think another reason why I liked the Hobbit, the Unexpected Journey, so much was, 2012 was just a bizarre year of films. That year you had in between the Avengers and, which I love, the Avengers. The Avengers was awesome. The Avengers and the Hobbit. You had all these big profile blockbuster movies. You had Prometheus. You had Brave. You had The Amazing Spider-Man, which I didn't. And then you had
file under unnecessary reboot. Yes.
Yeah.
Then you had Bourne Legacy, which I think that was fine, but I didn't really care much for it. And then you had Dark Knight Rises, which I think that was probably my biggest disappointment that year. All these big profile movies that had so much promising because of all these different attachments to it. And then when The Hobbit came out, I was able to lower my expectations and kind of prepare for what it was going to be. But when I finally saw it, I was like, I really enjoyed it. It felt like because the Shire, Bag End, and all that stuff, seeing Bilbo Baggins and Gandalf and all these other things, and even Frodo, for goodness sakes. I love Elijah Woods, and just that little cameo that he had. I was like, I'm back home. It was just that wonderful sense of familiarity. And then I said to him, I told Ben, you know what, Ben? There's a lot of potential for Desolation of Smaug to be better than Two Towers. That's
Oh no, you laid the gauntlet down, buddy.
He did.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
well, because I love Two Towers. I like Two Towers a lot, but it's probably my least favorite of the trilogy. And because knowing what Desolation of Smaug was going to be about, it was going to be about the thing with the dragon, and even also setting up more of Sauron. I was like, oh man, these are the stuff I was really looking forward to, and just the visual presentation, just like, what was that? I told Ben this, like, everything just felt like a video game land. It all felt like the barrel ride sequence, which when I saw it again, I was like, oh, that was pretty cool.
It's a fun ride. Is all it really was. Yeah.
But
the barrel scene is a fun ride. Originally, the barrel sequence was going to be the climax of the Part 1 Hobbit, back when it was a 2-film structure.
Yeah, yeah.
As you know. Yeah.
And then that cockamamie ending where the Thorin and the dwarves in the Lonely Mountain, like, trying to come up with that way of defeating Smaug. I'm like, where the heck did this come from? I thought it was going to kind of become this Raiders of the Lost Ark type of situation where they were going to have to go through, like, halls and passageways, and which I liked some of that, but I thought, like, at the end they were going to, like, melt some gold and, like, do some old medieval techniques where they were going to pour the gold from this, like, tall section, and it was going to fall on top of him.
That's what I thought too. Yeah.
Which I would have preferred that. I would have preferred an old medieval technique, but
yes.
But then it turned into, like, this weird Dr. Seuss environment.
It kind of did. And then we get this gold statue of Thorin's grandfather,
my gosh.
And Smaug is suddenly face to face with, the king under the mountain in a whole new way. There's only one thing in my film critic mind is making me think, as a film critic, what is the director intending? What's he trying to show me? It could only have been the purpose of that, to have Smaug be a bit terrorized and to be in a moment of uncertainty against something that was symbolic of dwarven power that was bigger than him. It doesn't translate to me, and I don't think the whole action set piece of all that turning on the furnaces and riding around in a wheelbarrow, none of that works for me, really. It does seem kind of cockamamie, and I was really, like, gripping the armrests in the theater at the time, as frustrated as you can imagine when I was watching this. But I think I understand visually what they wanted this to be a symbol of. Maybe I'm giving them too much credit. I don't know.
Yeah, but and then the ending. My theater literally booed at the ending. Like when it turned to black and after Bibble says, "What have we done?" Which actually mirrored my feelings towards the film. Like, what have you done? What have you guys done to the film? And then and then everyone in the theater just started booing that it ended where it at, and in
your theater you heard audible boos.
Yeah.
Well, when I was at the press screening, the people who were there are more polite than that, because a lot of them are invited by the studio, and a lot of them are journalists, and they're all there. But we were at the Chinese theater watching the press screening, and I heard a lot of gasps, and I heard a lot of people say, "What?
Yeah,
that's it?" But I didn't hear anybody boo.
Yeah, my theater booed.
Oh, wowzer!
So honestly, I would be more forgiving of that ending if the rest of the movie had felt a little bit more had a much more realistic vibe.
If it had been, more serious tone, it might have worked.
More realistic, and kind of, and it didn't feel, if it didn't feel awkward, like the movie just felt like these Dr. Seuss type of situations that you would find in one of those books. Now, Cliff, I gotta ask you this: do you know if the reason why why the films are the way that they are? Do you know if it's because Peter Jackson went down that route was because of the New Zealand actors strike that occurred just before The Hobbit went into filming, and then which I thought I heard kind of prevented him from going on certain locations and giving that movie the movie a much more organic feel. Did that kind of have a lot of stress on him? And I heard that there was a lot of just stressful situations leading up to the production.
There were many stressful situations, and you can tell by looking at the extras on the extended edition of An Unexpected Journey. You can see that whole chapter about how Peter had very ill health and he was very sick. All the problems that were plaguing that production included the loss of Del Toro, the fact that MGM was going to financially implode and they could not do a green light for the project. All that mess complicated things, but I don't think that the actors' strike had anything to do with them having a limitation on like physical locations or other resources like that. I am aware of Peter deciding to expand the film from 2 to 3 films because he had so much infrastructure in place. He already had the crew, the technical people who would do the rigging and the lights, the gaffers. Not just making a joke about Sam's dad, but actually the real people who do all the cabling and the electrical stuff. Because of the infrastructure he had in place at the studio, Peter had a proposal to Warner Brothers and New Line and said, if you guys give me just a little bit more money, I think I can make a 3rd film with additional material from the appendix, and I've shot so much footage already, and we've got so much in place, why don't you just give me a little bit of an infusion, and I'll give you another $1 billion gross profit from that one extra film, and we'll change the whole structure of the film. And that caused chaos with the licensees and the toy designers and all the people who had merchandise that was licensed, because all of a sudden they had to pull, Legolas and Tauriel toys off of the shelf that were already in retail stores, and they had to get them off the shelves and change the packaging because it said an unexpected journey on the packaging, and the characters didn't even show up, with the sudden change. So I think they were looking at a cost versus reward, ratio at that, and I'm not at all certain there was some influence from the actor strike. They had a lot of pain.
Or some sort of other incident, because it just, I don't know, it just didn't seem like Jackson was taking the full advantage of what made the first 2 films so great. And I'm kind of wondering if the reason why the movies look the way that they do was because he was like, you know what, I'm not going to stress myself with all this stuff. I'm just going to do the easy way. I'm going to just take the easy way out of this and make this easy on me because of all these other situations that have occurred in the past couple of months and years and all that stuff. So I don't know if that was a decision.
Yeah, the decision to do. Remember how good Lurtz was as a real practical effects character, and look at how Azog looks in the Hobbit films.
Boo.
This is the main criticism that everybody has levied against Jackson, and perhaps it's not entirely unearned. But switching from practical effects, villainous orc, to completely CGI villainous orc, leaves the audience feeling like you're taking shortcuts. It leaves the audience feeling like you're not inhabiting the world the same way. And it gets even more confusing with the change from 2 films to 3 films when they suddenly switch Azog with Balg. All of a sudden, Balg is the character who's chasing Thorin now, and not Azog, who was previously chasing him. And it gets, you're left scratching your head a bit with that, Yeah. And it's apparent that they did a rush job on the digital effects of Balg.
I know. I was watching the fluid simulations on the gold, and it's like, wow, I've actually done just as good myself on my laptop. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm kind of wondering if there was if Peter didn't have any time with the second film just to make the visual effects look better. I don't know if there was a time situation there, and I don't know if you spoke to the visual effects dude. What's his name again? Jim
Rigel?
Yeah. Did you ask him if there was like a time? Did you ask him like, why is it that the visual effects in this movie don't look as good as Weta has proven before that they can do better?
Jim Rigel was not involved with The Hobbit.
Oh, okay, he wasn't.
No, he was not. He was busy working on Gojira.
Okay.
Which he did an excellent job on. And we hosted, on the OneRing.net, I host a live webcast every week on Tuesday, and we had the great pleasure of having Jim Rigel just a few months ago. And he was, talking about Godzilla, and he was also talking about his work in retrospect on LOTR. And he said that he was always the guy who was he was the guy in the effects department who could be counted on for saying more smoke, more texture, more mist, more things like that. And the Hobbit seems a little bit shinier, cleaner, a little bit more golden-hued as an overall fable, as a story. And in The Lord of the Rings, it was much grittier, much more atmospheric, and there was add more smoke, which is why Godzilla looks the way that it looks, because it's being driven by that impetus by their visual effects director, Jim himself. And with Jim not being on The Hobbit, you can tell that the designers and the digital folks at Weta Digital were taking a different leading, direction.
Mm-hmm.
And it does not have the same level of dirt, that layered feeling of dirt and grime and all those extra layers of vapor or smoke or whatever it is that they're not adding. The Hobbit looks a little bit shinier and a little bit cleaner, and I wonder if they've been listening to that criticism over the past couple of years, and if they're going to turn it up a notch in Battle of the Five Armies.
Yeah.
You get some inkling of that by looking at the banner artwork, the big, big banner that was released today.
Yeah, definitely. You definitely kind of get this different tone set in that poster right there. What are some things that you can tell us about the Battle of the Five Armies that maybe people don't know about quite yet? Do you have any inside scoops that you can?
Oh, wow! Do I have anything I can reveal?
Yeah.
No. Well, yes, I do know some things that I can't say. I'm sorry.
Here's our chance.
All right,
chance, Ben.
Let's just put it this way: as excited as I am about the reappearance of Saruman, as played by the legendary Sir Christopher Lee, Count Dooku, Dracula, how many great, the Wicker Man, how many great roles has Christopher Lee been in our cinematic lives, in
James
my
Bond
life
villain.
as a cinema goer? He's beyond awesome. His heavy metal Christmas album, the crazy stuff that Christopher Lee does is just amazing. I have to say, as excited as we are to see more Saruman, and we have confirmation from Christopher Lee that we will see more of his character, much more, I will give you guys one big hint. Don't underestimate Radagast the Brown, as played by Sylvester McCoy, who was the Seventh Doctor.
Yeah.
Don't underestimate. But I won't reveal I can't reveal too much.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. One of the things I'm really curious about is, with this last film, how Peter is going to really tie it into Fellowship. I'm kind of wondering if, if the last couple minutes or the last few seconds of The Hobbit, if we're going to be seeing characters that we thought kind of like an X-Men Days of Future Past type of moment where, Logan wakes up in the mansion and he sees all the old familiar characters from the past. Are we going to kind of see something like that with a little montage of seeing Aragorn and seeing Merry and Pippin for the last time, maybe Frodo passing by Samwise Gamgee's house, which I know Sean has said, no, I'm not in it. I kind of got this gut feeling that he might actually just pop up just for a couple seconds,
Well, I've interviewed Sean many times, and he has said, I'm not involved in it. Sean's such a great guy, but there's ongoing rumors about Viggo Mortensen showing up because he took a little trip down to New Zealand for something, and he didn't say what he was doing and didn't say what he was down there for, but he's also in public, in the press, confirming that he's not involved and that his character will not show up. I'm excited at the idea of the connective tissue between Part 3 and Fellowship of the Ring in regards to Balin and some of the other dwarves leaving Erebor and perhaps making their expedition to go back to reclaim their kingdom of Moria. I had an interview with Adam Brown. Adam Brown is the delightful young actor who plays Ori, the dwarf, who is depicted as the youngest of the group, and who wants to give Smaug a taste of dwarven iron right up his jacksie. Adam Brown, I asked him on my live stream, didn't you guys shoot anything with your other actor, Ken Stott, who wonderfully portrays Balin? And I said, did you guys get to do any of this post-Erebor stuff where you pack up your bags and start to march from Erebor down to Moria? And he looked at me and he went, no, not saying. And I'm like, oh, come on, please, throw us a bone. Did you film any of it? And he said, I just can't say. But now that we have Star Wars movies branching out into other side films, that are going to depict other characters in the Star Wars universe, and we have these confirmed films that are going to be outside of the new pictures that J.J. Abrams is doing.
Mhm.
Isn't it even possible that after Peter Jackson wraps up Final Hobbit Part 3, that we might have this continuous whispered about bridge film? I'm doing air quotes right now. The bridge film that everyone's whispering about, that will show the hunt for Gollum, that will show young Aragorn going to help Gandalf look for Gollum and capture him. Are we going to see any of the dwarves that we're familiar with from the Hobbit film go and try to reclaim Moria? It would be great. There's lots of great stuff directly from the appendix that they do legally have the rights to adapt. I wonder if anybody at Warner Brothers is going to scratch their little dollar signs above their head and make something like this happen. The rumors continue to swirl, but I don't have any confirmations yet.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen. I think we're just going to see like a Revenge of the Sith ending montage of all the characters taking their proper positions into the universe that we know. So Ben, what are some of the things that you're looking forward to Battle of the Five Armies?
Just something better than the last one.
I think I am going to be very honest. I think this movie has the potential to be better, to be the best of the bunch. I think because it's going to be the one that's going to be connecting everything together. It's going to end it's going to conclude everything, but there's still so much there that can go wrong. It's still that possibility, and that's what I'm kind of going into this new movie with, that mindset.
Yes.
So yeah. But anyway, we're gonna go ahead and wrap it up. This is the longest episode of Story to Screen ever, and
you can say to all your friends, we have gone really, really, really epic on this.
Literally, lengthwise, and great, and just a great time with you, Cliff. But
it's great, yeah.
Thank you for taking the time out on your busy schedule and joining us. Ben, where can people find more of your work?
Most of my work is on indyvfx.com. That's INDYVFX.com, and that's where I've got most of my recent work, visual effects and otherwise.
Okay. Cliff, where can people find more of your work?
Oh, you guys can find my live webcast every Tuesday at 5 o'clock Pacific time on the OneRing.net. We're currently using the Ustream client, and I'd be very happy if you guys check out my documentary feature film, Ringer's Lord of the Fans, which has Dominic Monaghan as our narrator, and a wild little time capsule of how fandom for Tolkien has changed over all these decades. You can find it on the iTunes store. Ironically, it took Apple and Sony about 7.5 years to finally get my movie on the iTunes store.
Wow. Wow.
Out of a 10-year license, I have not had my movie out on iTunes until, just this past year, really.
Wow.
So,
wow.
And the movie came out in 2005, but I would love it if you guys check it out and,
sure, we'll try to
let me know what you think.
Yeah, definitely.
And you can always follow me on Twitter at QuickBeam2000.
Oh.
QuickBeam being one of Treebeard's younger friends.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And that's going to do it for this episode of the Story to Screen podcast. You can find us on iTunes. You can find us on Facebook. We also have a YouTube page as well. I also want to make an announcement that Joshua Ling, our technician specialist, and my regular co-host, he's trying to find ways to expand our iTunes page to where we can upload more episodes, because the way that we've got it on there right now is very limited. So we want to try to bring back our classic episodes, such as the Hobbit reviews, and even the Man of Steel, for example, Pacific Rim, some other classic movies that we've done. So we're going to try to expand on that in the near future, whenever he gets the time. He's up in California right now visiting his girlfriend. So, but anyway, thank you, gentlemen, for joining us tonight. It's been a great honor, Cliff, having you on my podcast. Look forward to having you on in the future. So we'll see what we can do. Benjamin, always a pleasure having you on, as usual.
No problem, yeah.
So this is going to be...
Very nice. My friends, Chris and Benjamin, it's really great to participate. I really love speaking with, in these intelligent ways about these movies that we love or hate. and it's been a fantastic experience. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank
Is this
you.
the first time you've been on a podcast?
Me? No, I've been on many.
Okay. Which ones have you been on? Have you done the Nerdist?
No. Let's see. Gosh, the last one that I just did, I did a Miyazaki podcast with the Cartoon Lord, and we did a long conversation about Howl's Moving Castle and Princess Mononoke. Some of my favorite
I wanna see
Miyazaki
that
films.
One so bad.
Yeah,
Princess
and
Mononoke, it looks good.
if you ever want to have another guest to talk about other things besides Tolkien, we'll do the Miyazaki thing sometime. I'm down anytime.
Joshua Ling, my regular co-host, he is a big Miyazaki fan, so we'll be sure to do that sometime. But we'll have to condense it to at least like a 45-minute episode. They can't be this long. So.
I'll try. I'll try to be more brief. I'll try.
Yeah. Well, this is an exception because this was an epic animated movie. But anyway, guys, thank you so much for joining us tonight, and take care, guys, and have a good night. Cheers, everybody.
Thank you.
All right.